Do recruiting rankings matter in June? Well, the Buckeyes always land in the top 5, and right now they stand at number 1. Notre Dame fans. Number 1. Okay. We will discuss Ohio State football, of course, over the next 60 minutes with you, as we typically do each and every week. Always do 165 consecutive weeks with these guys. From the top, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts, 247 Sports, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Scoop. Guys, how we doing today?
Good.
Doing well.
Kevin, let's start with you. And everybody out there knows the drill. Leave the comments and questions there in the live chat. We will get to them. And please, again, show your appreciation in a number of ways. Hit the like button. The super chat is available to you. We've got 3 of the best for over an hour each and every week. Kayan Lee, Ellenwood, Georgia, corner, 5'11", 185, top 20 at his position, another top 150 recruit and commit to the Buckeyes.
Yeah, one-time Georgia commit, and he ends up committing to Ohio State. He took a couple of officials, including Ohio State, took Nebraska and Oregon as well. But, his relationship with Ohio State was always there, even when he committed to Georgia. Ohio State has recruited this school before. It's the same school that produced Antoine Jackson. Ohio State was a finalist for Kristen Miller. Didn't get him. He ended up staying at Georgia. But, I think that Lee is somebody who I had an opportunity to see during our Southern Swing. Not like that 6'1" corner, but I think he's advanced in his skills. Obviously the recruiting services believe so, with him really as a composite 4-star, according to 247. I think that he's somebody that gets into that room and immediately kind of throws his hat in the ring. He's going to need a little seasoning, but Ohio State had a couple of years of where the recruiting wasn't necessarily up to the standards of where they were used to. So it replenishes, it helps replenish a room in a class where Ohio State is going to put a big focus in the secondary, probably 4 safeties, potentially 4 corners. I really like Lee. I think it's a big get. And, once again, it shows the power of Ohio State to be able to go into suburban Atlanta and be able to pull a player of Lee's caliber out.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about this commitment. And I know our people who saw him from 24/7 look at him as kind of a hard-working guy who's very physical, probably more of a boundary corner maybe than the field side, but he does have the athleticism to also play the field side if need be. And the things that I heard that people who are much more in the know than I am about this whole situation basically said that the Ohio State coaches really wanted Lee. So he was at the camp last year, obviously different coaches at Ohio State then, but he was offered by Ohio State at that point, and obviously Ryan Day knew all about him. So, yeah, it kind of came full circle here this week. He made the visit. And I think it was even a bit of a surprise probably for the Ohio State coaches that he had made the commitment to Ohio State.
I like to look at the range on a recruit at times. He is the number 226 player according to 24/7's own rankings. He's the number 76 player according to On3. So that's a range of about 150 spots there. And it just gives you different perspectives on what some people think of him. But I like his aggression in defending the run. When you watch his highlights, at least he doesn't shy away from contact, and he's not the biggest guy, so you like to see that. He doesn't he's not worried about being physical. Plays a lot of off man, so I haven't really seen him do much press at this point, but fights through blockers to get to the ball on screens and things like that. So yeah, I could see, as Steve said, a boundary guy. I could also see him being a nickel, and that's a starting position at Ohio State, and it's a very important position at Ohio State. And Kevin talking about 4 corners and 4 safeties, you got to remember they play 5 defensive backs on the field at all times, and they like to rotate some if they could. And so you've also got to bring in guys that they only have 6 scholarship corners, I believe, around there. They lost 2 to the portal in Legend Cavazos and Ryan Watts. They had some strikeouts before then as well. So They've really got to just bring in as many as they can and basically figure out where everybody fits once they get here for some of these guys. Because, you have to generally assume like a corner can move to safety at any point. And with Ohio State no longer having that hybrid bullet, that may push out some of the guys they had recruited to play that position. And so there's situations there where they've got a couple of recruited bullets on the roster in Jalen Johnson and Court Williams that have to slim down or get bigger, basically, to get on the field. And if that doesn't happen, you need to have safeties that can play. So they're going to bring in a bunch, and this is the start. It's a decent start. It's a good start. It's not as good as Alabama with 2 5-star commits at corner right now, but it'll do.
Olas Alanin, I will do my best with that one. He is a crystal ball selection by 247 Sports to Alabama. Offensive tackle at 6'6", 315. Out of Windsor, Connecticut. He's right up the road. Windsor, Connecticut is a high 4-star. Goodness gracious, look at that. Number 122 in the country, top-rated player in the state of Connecticut. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Thomas Clark is asking about him. Do we have any beat on whether the Buckeyes are in any kind of range for him?
I mean, absolutely. I think Ohio State's in good shape. I think it's Ohio State. I think it's Alabama right there. There certainly might be some other schools. I mean, let's not give credit to – he's not a Connecticut kid. He's a Finland kid. He's just going to one of those candy-ass academies up there in Connecticut. But I think Ohio State made quite the impression on him. I think that they have a very solid chance. I mean, then again, we've seen plenty of battles against Alabama for offensive linemen through the years. Some work out, and Ohio State gets them, like Isaiah Prince. Some don't work out. You put my feet to the fire right now, I'm going to say Ohio State, but there might be a little recency bias on that based on the visit. But with the Columbus Blue Jackets having a general manager from Finland who is going to certainly do whatever he can do to help Ohio State there, because you do have a little bit of a relationship between the two organizations. Nick Saban can do whatever he wants to. He could bring in 15 hot Finnish babes or whatever, but I think that Ohio State has a lot of things to offer.
This is why I bring these guys in. Look at this information. Olas, I get that should have tipped me off a bit that he wasn't necessarily from Connecticut.
I guess his dad played in NFL Europe years ago when they had that. So there is a little bit of a football background, I think, for this family. Everybody under the sun has offered him. He's got 45 offers according to our database, which I take in is probably most, if a lot of the Power 5 conference schools have offered this kid 6'6", 315 right out of Central Casting. So I think that getting him on campus for a visit was huge. And now we'll see if they're able to close the deal with Justin Fry, if he can get a big-time offensive lineman like this. Just checking his ranking, 122 nationally, number 15 offensive tackle. So he's up there, a guy that you definitely love to have if you can put him in this class. And that's my thing, is they need impact players, offensive line, defensive line, and, maybe secondary, I guess. I don't know. Linebacker, they're kind of downplaying that at this point. So they've got some guys at linebacker, but offensive line, defensive line, and secondary, they need all the help they can get those 3 position areas.
Anytime you can get the top 3 offensive linemen in Ohio and the top offensive lineman out of Connecticut, you got to do it. And Kevin, you can say what you want, but we all know the mean streets of Greenwich, that will develop you. That will get you straight away. That will get you mean enough to play in the Big Ten.
Yeah, Loomis Chaffee is not some candy ass school. They are hardcore to the hardcore up there. Loomis Chaffee.
I was going to say, where did Hunter Hearst Hemsley go when he was still kind of a jobber coming up, and they had him dressed up like a total preppy boy? I gotta go back into my wrestling history to remember that, but certainly the mean streets of Greenwich.
Yep.
But Tony, let's not dare Ryan Day and company to cross the state line into Massachusetts, because we know who owns that state.
Yes, that is Michigan territory. That sometimes can still be sublet out to Don Brown, but yes, that is all Michigan's. I honestly think Ryan Day needs to go back to his home in terms of recruiting and lock down New Hampshire. You know, let's get that going. You don't want to lose those guys to the team up north.
All Steve has to do is say, post questions now, and then the floodgates open. Here they come. James Smith, he seems to be a pretty good prospect as well. Defensive lineman at 6'4", 310, top 10 to 15 player in the country out of the state of Alabama. Would the Buckeyes have any shot at him? Billy's writing.
I'm gonna say no out of Alabama. Good luck getting him out of the SEC, let alone out of the state. Five-star guy, top 15 player. Without even, I have not heard him discussed much at all in OSU recruiting circles. So, no, don't get your hopes up on that one.
I'd say Georgia or Alabama for him is what it looks like to me, but he's got a ton of offers, obviously, being number 13 in the country. I'll look and see if Ohio State ever put a bid in on him, but
They have.
Yeah, they've got an offer to him, but you got to get him on campus too. That's the big thing. So, that's when we talk about guys who made visits, those are guys who are serious possibilities to end up in the Ohio State class if they make a visit. If they never visit, then it's kind of hard to figure that there's much interest.
We can look up all of the top guys out there that we want to, but you can't take them all, and not all of them are necessarily going to be interested. And he's a kid out of Montgomery, Alabama, and Ohio State just doesn't recruit the Deep South. I mean, I don't consider Georgia the Deep South. I mean, Alabama, Mississippi, maybe some parts of Louisiana. I mean, obviously Ohio State's changing that up a little bit with Tackett Curtis, but he's a stone's throw away from the state of Texas. So, I don't necessarily say that he's, running around Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, around some bayou or whatever. No, they zero shot at him.
The live chat is gunning for like the top 10 players in the nation here. We got Willie going after Caleb Downs. He's out of Georgia. Ohio State with a lot of success out of Georgia. Arguably the best safety in the country, best player in the state of Georgia, top 10 player nationally, 6 feet, 185. Any chance there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, Ohio State just hosted him on an official visit. I put that one as Ohio State and Alabama, a recurring theme, if you will. Certainly Georgia's involved as well. Talked to some insiders that are friends of mine down that way, and they don't feel as strongly about Georgia's chances there. So, this one isn't just throwing names against the wall. There's a history there. Caleb Downs, his dad, and Tim Walton have known each other for quite some time, so there's some ties there. And I think Ohio State's done a very good job. I think there'll be some debate on who you talk to. There's certainly some Alabama people who think that this one is in their column. There's certainly some Ohio State people, such as myself, that think that this one is trending Ohio State's way. I played my card there. I think Ohio State's going to get them, but I don't say that with any supreme amount of confidence, but I still feel decent about it.
It'd be a huge get, and obviously safety is an important position in this Ohio State offense with 3 of them on the field. Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Clemson, those seem to be the ones. And he's made official visits just in the month of June to Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. So those seem to be his top 4, I would say, at this point.
We're going to stay with Willie here because even though it's not Buckeye related, it is Buckeye related. The team up north here. Can anyone think of 2 better quarterbacks coming out of the state of Michigan than Dante Moore and CJ Carr? And they both seem to be slipping away, if not already have slipped away from Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, that's never a good sign. And they're not going to have their existing quarterbacks there forever. And if you've got two guys in your backyard, one a legacy Michigan guy, and you lose both of them, it's you can blame NIL all you want, but like that just can't happen. And you look at their class right now, I think they're ranked 45th nationally in the 24/7 composite. They've got 7 commits. One of them is ranked in the top 200. Everybody else is, the second highest ranked guy is they've got 2 4-stars and 5 3-stars. Most of the class is ranked outside of the top 400, and it's still really. I mean, we're at the halfway point, basically, a little bit beyond at this point. So there's still plenty of time, but this ain't good. Right now, Northwestern is ranked ahead of them in the class, and that's not a great sign either. And this should be where Michigan. They say it takes like the year after you win a national championship is really like when you start to make hay, but you should be able to capitalize on going to the playoffs. This was the best moment of Jim Harbaugh's career, and they've responded with it looking like he's getting the same kind of class he would when he was still on the hot seat. So I think it's a pretty bad sign, and the headline there is the quarterbacks, man. That's just not good.
I was going to yield my time to Tony about Michigan's track record of not developing quarterbacks, since we're talking about Carr and Moore. But as I look through their class, they have a 2-star kicker out of Ann Arbor. There's not a single player in that class that I would sit there and say that Ohio State is lamenting not being able to land at this point. But yeah, you come off of a Big Ten championship. I mean, it's the highest point in the Michigan program in quite some time, and you're not catching any buzz. I mean, yes, they did go through some coaching changes there. Their short-term lease on their defensive coach from the Baltimore Ravens, they ended up having to turn him back into to Harbaugh's brother. But so you run into some issues of relationships and whatnot. And I'm going to call a duck a duck. Jim Harbaugh is a strange duck. And, people, he's not for everybody. And, I just don't, I think one of the biggest issues with Michigan, we kind of alluded to it earlier, is about recruiting the state of Massachusetts. Michigan needs to get into some of these battles. Obviously, Ohio State and Notre Dame and some of these schools are recruiting the right kids. Michigan just doesn't go head to head that often. I mean, CJ Carr obviously being an exception to that rule. But I just don't understand why they are recruiting against Auburn and some of these other schools. I mean, there are a lot of kids up in the upper Midwest that they still could get that would be probably, at least would understand what Michigan football once was, just due to proximity. Going out and getting some kid out of Zephyr Hills, Florida, I don't think is going to necessarily mean anything at this point. And I'm not saying every 3-star is the same, but they've made some curious decisions in terms of their recruiting and losing out on both those quarterbacks. I mean, I knew pretty early that CJ Carr was going to get away from them, but the Dante Moore, if he ends up at Oregon or has ended up in Oregon, I've kind of lost track of that one. That one is a real kick in the jimmies, if you will, because that should never happen.
What Michigan football used to be. I felt that one. At least for some of my audience, I felt it. Buyers vacation rentals. This is an offbeat question, but here we go. How do you guests feel? I think I'm going to go with, how do your guests feel about the YouTube channel, The Depressed Ginger, which I've heard of. I know nothing about it. I've never seen it myself. He seems to have all the major insider information on recruits. Scary thing is he seems to be right 95% if the time on recruits, of the time on recruits.
I've only heard of this guy in the last week. I didn't know he was on YouTube. I didn't know if it was a Twitter. I didn't know if it was Sir Yacht's, ginger friend. I didn't know anything really about him, but more power to you. Like I don't, you can get insider information with subscriptions to a lot of sites and then go talk about it on YouTube. I mean, there's no copyright infringement or anything on that, I don't think. And I don't, I've he's a guy with a following. So, like I said, more power to you. But I don't know anything about him. I've never seen him, heard from him. I don't know his track record. I don't know anything else about him.
Yeah, I don't know much about him either. I assume he's doing what Tony's saying and aggregating a lot of information from a lot of different sources and, just putting it out there. I mean, it's hard to be connected to a lot of different kids in a lot of different colleges. There aren't many people that well connected really within our industry. So, it is always fun to hear, people, make guesses, informed guesses of where these kids are going to go. But again, I don't spend a whole lot of time in all that speculation and worrying about that because, at the end of the day, they're going to get the players that they're going to sign, and those are the players you got to develop, and those are the players you got to win with. So, Ohio State's year in and year out up in the top 5. One player doesn't really make that big of a difference. So I don't get too wrapped up one way or the other on it.
Yeah, I just assume most gingers are depressed because they have no souls. At least that's what South Park told me. But yeah, to agree with Steve and Tony, this sounds like an aggregator and somebody who just kind of throws some, what against the wall to see what sticks. And the good news about being that type of guy for that guy is you remember the makes. You don't really remember the misses. If you sit there and you deliver 10 pieces of good news and you miss out on 3 others, I mean, people are going to be high-fiving and celebrating the 10 makes. They're not going to be about the other ones. So, I don't know about this 95% that Byers Vacation Rentals mentioned. I don't have any reason to doubt Byers. I mean, he's, longtime guest here on this channel. I mean, like the poster, but I don't know. I was not aware of this depressed ginger until a couple days ago. And honestly, I spent the next day being like, well, which insiders out there are there that are redheads? I mean, I figured that I thought maybe they were sitting there saying that, this guy from this network or that guy. I mean, and I don't know why they figured he was depressed. I mean, sometimes I'm a little slow to get to the finish line, but I always finish the race.
Going back to the Sir Yacht thing, this was going on during COVID and the cancellation of the season. And he's throwing all of this stuff out there, and most of it is figuring it was a joke. And I had a parent saying he's been like, the Sir Yacht stuff is exactly what we're hearing behind the scenes. And I'm like, what? Is the parent of a player saying this? Like, how can this be? And sometimes, as Kevin said, you only focus on the makes, and sometimes you get lucky with some of the stuff you're saying. But yeah, hey, keep it up. YouTube is an outlet for an awful lot of people.
Well, as Kevin said, this industry, if that's what you want to call it, because it has so many different facets at this point, we'll just say that the industry of sports media has become just, I don't know what percentage to put on it, these people who just, they collect from others. I saw this on Twitter. I saw this on Athlons. I saw this on Buckeyes Scoop. I saw this on 247. Let's put it into a column, and you guys figure out what it all means, or I think it means this. Which is fine, It's just like I heard. Who is the longtime Sports Illustrated columnist from years and years ago? Top-notch guy. Why can't I remember his name?
Rick Riley
Rick Riley. Thank you, Rick Riley. I saw him speak one time at ESPN. We had a luncheon, and he said very accurately, at least in my estimation, he said the great thing about the internet is that everybody has a platform. So the awful thing about the internet is everybody has a platform. So anybody can start a blog or a YouTube channel or do whatever they want. All right. Kajazar. KJ. No, I think he likes jazz. I don't know. Anyway, he's been here. Thank you for being here. Your question, just the vibe on the latest for 2023 quarterback recruiting. Who ends up at Ohio State in your opinion? I think they're off to a good start there.
Well, they don't have a 23 quarterback at this point.
Like a 24.
You're thinking 24.
Yeah.
They they appeared to be really close to flipping Austin Novosad from Baylor. And then Texas A&M comes to the table. And I think that really throws a wrench in a lot of things. There's some family ties to A&M. Dripping Springs is an Austin suburb, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if you're close to Austin that can't have ties to A&M. So that one appears to be kind of a big question mark. Then you have Brock Glenn, and he before Ohio State got involved looked like he was heading to Auburn. And now a lot of schools have gotten involved. LSU, some others have gotten involved as teams are realizing the 23 dominoes are falling. A lot of them have fallen, and we all have to scramble. My understanding is, Ohio State thinks very highly of both of these quarterbacks. I mean, maybe they see Novosad a little higher at this point. But I don't know if I necessarily see either of them being on the precipice of committing to Ohio State. Now, maybe Ohio State's impact on Austin Novosad will make a difference there. But, I don't know. I mean, and then they certainly have had some other quarterbacks come in and shoot, including Jax Leatherwood out of San Diego. And he is a Nevada commit, I believe. They didn't offer him at this point. Jax is 6'7", tall kid who's still kind of figuring things out. I mean, he still has some mechanical issues that he's working on because he's so big and he's got such a wide gate. So they're still kind of working on it. So unfortunately, Jazzar, I guess was the name there. I can't give you a definitive answer. Maybe Steve or Tony knows something more there, but truth be told, I don't think Ryan Day and Corey Dennis necessarily have a clear picture at this point either, even if it appeared that Ohio State was very close, in my opinion, to flipping Novosad.
Yeah, I would probably just echo what you said, that it's kind of up in the air at this point. Oh, I'm going to mute this.
Well, then I'll jump in for Steve. Yeah, the problem now is you're probably going to have to flip somebody who is already committed to a school and who's already built relationships there. And while you're trying to do that, the original school is going to be telling you, you have a chance to play here. They're just looking for somebody in 2023 to help fill out their room because you're in between the number one quarterback in the 2022 class, the number one quarterback in the 2024 class. Oh yeah, there's also a 5-star from 2021 in there as well. So we want you because we want you to play. Ohio State wants you just because they need another body in the room. And you obviously have to be careful how you say that kind of stuff so that you're not trying to downplay their talent or their commitment to work or anything like that. But it's a tough deal to flip somebody because, as I said, those relationships are there. And Ohio State's just trying to horn in on that and say, hey, come look at Ohio State. We can put you in the NFL. And while they can, who knows how much that 2023 guy is going to be able to play. That's why it's been very difficult to land somebody, which is also another reason why they, you have no problem taking Dylan Raiola that early because things weren't going all that swimmingly in 2023 anyway.
Where goes one? Says Kevin, enjoyed your stream this morning. A good time to let everyone know where these guys can be found. Kevin, what do you got going?
Yeah, I'm just clouding up the whole picture even more. I mean, of course, you can find me over on Buckeyes Scoop with the Big Me Kickoff, but I also had a channel of my own back in the day, and I figured before YouTube turns off my monetization, I should probably start doing some shows there. So I have an unnamed project over at my other channel, which I need to probably look up what the name is on that one. I've come up with some ideas for a name, but I'm not ready to release it yet. But you can find me there. You can also find me on social media, on Twitter at Kevin_Noon, and of course over at BuckeyesScoop.com.
By the way, Kevin, the voice of college football is patented. It's a trademark. So just so you steer clear of that one.
I was going to say the mega voice of college football. Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't have that one covered. I guess I'm going to have to scurry back to the patent office to get that taken care of. Tony,
Well, I think I would first welcome all of the viewers to pitch in ideas for names for Kevin's stream, or sorry, the Mega Voices stream, and give him some ideas, help him with that. You can find me. Podcast is the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. We drop it a couple times during the week, during the off season. Find me there on Twitter at Tony Gerderman, like you see, and you can find me at Buckeye Scoop as well.
Steve.
Yes, I'm the definitive voice of college football, is what I prefer to go by. But at any rate, bucknuts.com, at Steve Hellwagon, that's where I'm at. And just getting ready to turn the calendar over to July, and then the football season will be here before we know it. So everybody get their last bit of vacations and everything in now, because August 1st, thereabouts, camp will be starting, and we'll be getting right to it.
Steve, we'll start with you and then go through everybody else. Notre Dame's had the number one recruiting class for the last several months. Ohio State, with their last couple of commits, has surpassed them. Okay. It's always been my thought that if you've got a top 3 to 4 recruiting class, you're good to go. It's much more about fit and all of that past that, whether you're 1 or 3 or 4, whatever. After that, it starts to drop in talent levels to where I think it really matters that you can't argue that, okay, we had the 13th best class, but it was the best class for us, kind of thing, and we can compete for a national championship. But in terms of perception, just some kind of perception out there where Ohio State's usually 2, 3, or 4, that if they surpass what is always an SEC school and they close as the number one class, whether that means anything on the field, do you think that means something or has some kind of impact?
Well, I don't know. Ohio State had the number one class one time in my recollection, like 1996. And there were a lot of good players in that class, but they didn't win a national championship with that team. They came close with 1998 when those guys were juniors, which was like Andy Katzenmoyer, David Boston, and a bunch of other guys. They had a really good class in 2002 who were freshmen when they won the national championship, and they were number 2, I believe, that year. And that was a powerhouse class. I mean, Troy Smith won the Heisman Trophy, Maurice Claret. I think there is something to be said that kind of brands those guys as guys that are coming in to win big things, I say, at your college. But, it's also an individual sport, but it's also a team sport. Each individual needs to improve and grow and develop and go from being great high school players, which is what everyone's kind of judged on when they do these recruiting rankings, to being great college players. And that's ultimately what matters, is winning championships at the college level, and not so much the recruiting rankings. I think assistant coaches can get paid by showing that they are outstanding recruiters. I think they can get head coaching jobs in some instances at MAC schools and different things like that, jumping off if they show that they're great in terms of recruiting and development. But, to say that it means anything, you don't get an extra fifth down or anything like that just because you had the best recruiting class. You have to go out each Saturday in the fall and prove it. And so, again, I've never been that wrapped up in the individual or the team rankings. I just kind of look at them with a grain of salt, knowing that it is possible that mistakes do happen. I've seen guys ranked number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 who never made it on to college or the NFL. And then we've seen guys like Chris Olave ranked 380, and, he goes with whatever it was, the 12th pick of the NFL draft. So sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong, but I never get too excited about it. I think it's something cool to talk about. Urban Meyer said, well, if you're keeping score, we want to be number 1. So, I always have had a problem with how they've kept score, because you allow Alabama to oversign and take 30 guys every year and then run off 10 of them every year. And I'm exaggerating, of course. But you allow them to take 30. Ohio State signs 22. They get more points for their 30 they have the number one class, even though Ohio State 1 through 22 matches them nearly man for man a lot of times. But again, a lot of generality there. But yeah, if you're keeping score, you want to be number one. It's kind of a neat bragging thing. And you look at Brian Hartline and all the capital he's built up just as a recruiter. And then obviously his guys have produced on the field too, but he's getting a lot of mileage out of this idea that he is right now the number one recruiting assistant coach in America. And, how he parlays that in the future, I guess we'll see.
My view on it is that success breeds success. And as long as you're a top class, it's going to continue there. I mean, it's once you don't have a good class, then people start to question, is the bloom off that rose? I think Ohio State could do a lot with winning a national recruiting title. I came from the Rivals Network, so I only know what Rivals rankings are, but no Northern team has won a national recruiting championship according to the Rivals rankings. That may be different elsewhere. I can't speak to that. Ohio State certainly has come close, has had number 2 classes, had number 3 classes. Pretty much every summer I seem to be writing a series about, is this the year Ohio State has the number 1 overall recruiting class? And then Quinn Ewers reclassifies, or something happens, or Alabama wakes up and finally starts recruiting and beats them by 175 points, because Alabama then that year sets the high water mark for any program in the nation, ever, in terms of what their rankings are. I agree with Steve in terms of, I don't know if the formula, each organization has its own formula. And once again, I know how the Rivals formula works, and they take the top 20 kids. But if you sign a 21-man class and they take the top 20 kids, you're not really getting to shed a lot. You might be getting that kicker or punter off if you have to take one that year, and then everything else is there, as opposed to taking 28 and being able to kind of pick and choose. So there is something in terms of what those numbers, how they come to pass. But you sit there and you get a number 1 recruiting class, and that's going to be, I think that's going to be the next step in the evolution for Ohio State's national reach. Ohio State's number 1 in the Big Ten, is always number 1 in the region, but being able to finally overcome UGA as of late, or Alabama, or you can go back when it used to be USC under Pete Carroll. I mean, these are the schools that are winning the recruiting title. And one of really the big differences, especially now, is you look at how UGA does it. UGA does it with a lot of Georgia kids. Alabama does it with a lot of Deep South kids. When Pete Carroll was doing it, there was a lot of kids west of the Rockies. Ohio State is doing it with more of a national reach, because you can't put together a number 1 class in the state of Ohio. It's just, the math is hard, but the math is real, and you just can't make it work that way. So Ohio State is a little challenged in terms of not having geography on its side. And I think, if anything, that makes what Ohio State's been able to do in the transition from Urban Meyer through Ryan Day that much more impressive. Because if you go back to Jim Tressel recruiting, which was an era ago, maybe 2 eras ago in terms of recruiting, he was able to do a lot more in state, because I think the state of Ohio produced more.
Yeah, I don't know if I just tried to see if Ohio State's 2002 class was the number 1 class in the composite, but they don't have that ranking. What Ohio State has been able to do, though, is even in a class that was ranked 3rd or 4th or 5th, their average ranking per recruit has been like 2nd. And you look at the 2017 class with the 24/7 composite, that class finished 2nd with 21 commits. Alabama finished 1st with 29, but Ohio State had almost a point higher average per recruit in terms of how 24/7 does that. So they finished 1st in the average ranking of recruit, but because they'll bring in a smaller number, although that's starting to go away as well. Will I be shocked if Ryan Day eventually does it? No, because they've been close. So why would I be shocked by them being one more, up higher, one more spot? And so you've got a lot of sorry, I'm getting some echo in here in my ears, but you've got a lot of opportunities and advantages at Ohio State to make the most of what you are. It's not easy though by any stretch, as we've seen. Is it inevitable? Maybe. I mean, heck, Texas A&M can do it. Anybody can.
More specifically, before we get to something Steve pointed out that's an interesting conversation going on in the chat, K Jazzar back with Mateo Uiagalelei. Will he end up at Ohio State as an edge rusher? Do you have any confidence there?
I had myself muted so I could cough. Much to the chagrin of Tim Prangley in the chat, who I think seems to believe that he's going to SC, I tend to think Mateo's going to Ohio State. And that's not just a matter of reading Big Dave, on Twitter and everything that's been there. I just think that the relationship's there. And I mean, it's not like his brother stuck around at home. So it's not like that there's a history of these kids being homebodies and needing to, be that close to the family unit or whatever. Again, I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up at SC. But I kind of read his comments of saying it was like SC1, Oregon 2. Who cares? Number 3. I'm adding a little bit of color to the conversation there. I see it differently. I'm under the impression Ohio State feels pretty good there too, but it's recruiting, so you don't know. I mean, I can kind of put it to the same situation with like Troy Bowles. Ohio State feels really good about Troy Bowles. Georgia feels really good about Troy Bowles. Somebody's going to be wrong at the end of the day. I mean, maybe we should ask the press ginger. I don't know.
I think somebody crystal balled Troy Bowles to Georgia today, from what I understand. But take that for whatever it's worth. I think Mateo had a great visit to Ohio State, but as you get away from that visit, it kind of lessens the impact as things go on, the recency bias and all that, and also perhaps a locale bias as well. If it's closer for him to go and play somewhere closer to home, USC, wherever that might be, maybe that's a consideration as well.
Yeah, I see Brian Hartline's name mentioned all over the place in the chat. And I tweeted this out today, but today is the 18th anniversary of the day he committed to Ohio State. So a day that will be recognized forever as long as Brian Hartline sticks around. And then if he ever leaves, then forget about it. Just don't even commemorate it anymore. But 18 years ago today, so his commitment is now old enough to buy cigarettes. Or no, I think you got to be 21 for that.
Yeah, they've changed that now. I don't know what you could do at 18. Whatever you could do at 18, I was doing at 16, and whatever you could do at 21, I was doing at 18. So
I'm old enough to remember watching him run the hurdles at the state track meet in 2003, 2004, whenever that was. So, yeah, that's been a good long time ago, certainly.
What database is keeping track of when Brian Hartline committed?
Well, it was a research thing that I was doing to check on some old Ohio State coaches. Not that Brian Hartline is old, but like looking back at their recruiting and their commitment stories and dates and stuff. And I actually found 3 different dates and then got it finalized. I used BSB, Steve, to give me the exact date.
The authority.
So, and it said, in the story on June 28th, I'm like, that's good enough for me.
At least up through 2003, it was the authority.
Yeah, I remember picking up the magazine from Big Bear because it was too cheap to buy it, so I had to get the free ones.
Interestingly, went out of business.
They listed him his junior year as having like 40 catches for 300 yards, but he went to Ohio State's camp and earned an offer.
Yeah, no doubt.
I can't imagine that Brian Hartline is not breaking enough tackles to do better than like 8 yards per catch in high school. But, man, looking at Mateo's size and measurables here, 6'4", 255, he's about as big as his brother. And considering how his brother threw the ball last year, he might have wanted to go the edge rush position himself. But we shall see. So yeah, the conversation in the chat that sticks out. One does involve Brian Hartline, but I want to get to so Willie had made a comment about Ohio State more than recruiting. It's about, of course, a great job developing players, and then row the boat saying, who's been developed at Ohio State? And that's a tricky question because, of course, Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, could they just have stepped on anywhere? No development. They're going to be first round picks in the NFL draft. Versus, okay, can we point to a lot of mid 3-stars that were developed at Ohio State and became impact players, NFL players?
Yeah,
Well, I
think it's a mix.
Well, just to and this will go back a little bit, but I'll bring it back more present day ish. But Brian Hartline's class in 2005, a couple of other 3-stars, he was a 3-star, a couple of other 3-stars in that class, James Laurinaitis and Malcolm Jenkins. But in terms of development, here's something that Ohio State's 2015 defensive backs. These are just 8 of those guys in that secondary that year. Eli Apple, Damon Arnett, both first-rounders. Garyon Conley, first-rounder. Marshawn Lattimore, first-rounder. Denzel Ward, first-rounder. Von Bell, All-American, second-rounder. Malik Hooker, All-American, first-rounder. Tyvis Powell, 3-year starter, national champion. I think Eli Apple was a 5-star on ESPN. Everybody else, Von Bell was a 5-star. Everybody else, 3 and 4 stars. So, that's one example. And I see some other talks in here about, CJ Stroud not being developed, or, Chris Olave, obviously another one. But there's plenty of development going on. I'm not going to name all the names because we can go around each of us and name 10 or 5.
Well, I just jumped in and looked at the 2015 Ohio State recruiting class, and I scrolled down, and lo and behold, at one of the commitments was a guy named Denzel Ward from Macedonia, Nordonia. He was the number 270 player in the country. Then the guy right below him was a quarterback from the Plains, Ohio, Athens High School, Joe Burrow, 280th in the country. Those 2 guys, I would say somebody developed them. I know Burrow wasn't completely developed at Ohio State and didn't finish at Ohio State, but I would say, and they were 4-star guys, I could think anybody inside the top, looks like top 350 was a 4-star, but that seems kind of a loose definition of a 4-star to me. But at any rate, that'll give you an idea. Then as you scroll on down, Robert Landers was a guy who played a lot of football at Ohio State. He was 481. Damon Arnett was clear down at 653. So until he was having problems, obviously, off the field, he was an NFL player. So
Davon Hamilton in that class.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think it's a mix. I think obviously the top, in a given year, they're going to sign 20 to 25 guys. And let's just say 4 of the top 6 or 7 in each class are going to contend for All-American and NFL. I mean, you can pretty much figure that 4 of the top, read the top 7 names and figure out that 3 or 4 of those guys are going to pan out and be best in the Big Ten at their position, possible first 3-round pick of the NFL draft. I mean, they're going to pan out. That's just the history of this whole recruiting phenomenon, is that blue stars or blue chips generally, are going to pan out probably about 60% of the time, roughly 50 to 60% of the time. Where you win championships, to me, is when you have those other guys who fill in around the edges and around the cracks, and like Denzel Ward, play like blue chip guys, outplay their ranking. That's when you have a chance to have a special team, because, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, they're all going to have in their starting lineup 8 or 10 blue chip guys out of the 22 who made it, but the other 10 or 11 are program guys. And I think that there's a lot of credit that goes to the coaches for that.
Yeah, just to kind of say the same things a different way. When you're Ohio State and you recruit a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys, therefore those guys can't. I mean, are they developed or whatever? Well, they were 4- and 5-stars, so I mean, we unfairly judge them differently. So when you sit there and you have, you bring in some 3s. I mean, sometimes you're rolling the dice on some of these guys, and they've been able to develop some of them. They've not been able to develop some of them. I'm sitting here kind of looking through. I'm working on a project as well for a feature that I'll be running to cover me while I'm on vacation here in a few weeks. And guys like, Blue Smith didn't work out. He had 2 receptions for 19 yards. He's a 4-star. People are going to focus on that, but not look at Chris Olave in the class, who had 175 receptions, 2,700 yards, and 35 touchdowns. You go, and it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Guys do get developed, but when you already come in as a top 100 kid, a top 247 kid, or whatever, and you perform as expected, well, that's not development. That's just living up to your billing. So you can become a victim of your own success.
Well, and
I think
that's exactly
taking a swipe at CJ is a little bit disingenuous, because they didn't lose the Oregon game or the Michigan game because of anything CJ Stroud did or didn't do. So I don't get where attacking him and whatever. I mean, he is what he is. His number and his impact kind of speaks for itself.
Well, and anytime you're trying to apparently use the Rose Bowl performance as proof that he wasn't developed or didn't play well is kind of baffling to me. And even the first start against Minnesota, he threw for 294 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. And then against Oregon, it was 484 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Michigan, 394 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interception. Utah, 573 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. These are examples of 4 bad games where he threw 15 touchdowns and 3 interceptions and went for about 1,500 yards. There's a segment of Buckeye fans who I apparently only think quarterback play started at Ohio State from 2018. And they only measure guys by the very best that Dwayne Haskins ever was and the very best that Justin Fields ever was. And if you're short of that, you suck. And to say CJ looked bad his first 2 games is ridiculous. And to say CJ Stroud didn't look as good as Dwayne Haskins at his best or Justin Fields at his best would be accurate. But then it was also better than any other quarterbacks outside of those 2. And when you are better, and he ended up having a season that was arguably the best in Ohio State football history for what he did in 12 games, throwing for over 4,400 yards. And the desire to latch on to some of these flaws that people believe CJ Stroud has, there are so many other issues to, if you want to complain about something with Ohio State, there are much more real issues than the guy who has not been flawless, but as close to flawless as you can get as a quarterback in the game. And I get annoyed when I see it wherever, and I see it on Twitter, I see it on our message board, see it here now. It's ridiculous to me.
If Ohio State would have been able to run the ball with any success against Michigan to change things up, that would have loosened a couple things up. I can certainly go back to a couple of throws that either CJ was a little bit off on or didn't make. There were a couple throws that it's like, I wish he would have, been able to do that. We might have been talking about a little bit of a different setup at that point. I would have been able to get a steak in Indianapolis. But, what happened. But, yeah, there's nobody hates the Buckeyes like Buckeyes fans. And I'm not saying everybody in general, but there certainly are some people out there that just are very critical and look at them through an eye of where they're robots and video game characters that should be able to to perform at 110% capacity at any given moment, at any point. I mean, you can't get up for every game, and and I'm not using that as an example for Michigan or for Oregon even. I mean, those are big games, you got to get up for them, but you run into times where you're just not as sharp. But CJ Stroud's unsharpness is better than a lot of other people's sharpness. And to get back to something else that Row the Boat had to say as well, no, it's not about yardage and some of these others. It's about points that get put up. But there's a lot of things that go into there. If you're gonna oversimplify the argument, I'm gonna oversimplify the argument too and say that it doesn't rest all on CJ Stroud at that point. And truthfully, if the defense would have been 20% better, not as much of it would have been on CJ Stroud's shoulders. So it's a disingenuous argument.
Absolutely. It's a team game, and the quarterback gets too much credit, gets too much blame. And also, to be cliched again, as somebody famously once said, the other guys on the other side are on scholarship as well. So you're not throwing against air. It's difficult to stand in that pocket with all sorts of chaos going on around you. And I've said this before, and I don't know if this is true, but it just seems to be, with all the interaction I have with fans and their expectations, is I think there's just too much watching of Rodgers and Brady on Sundays and thinking that everybody should just automatically throw like that.
People need to go back and watch the Ohio State, the 2016, 2017 Ohio State, to see how difficult passing the ball can be and how much easier it is now for the Ohio State quarterbacks. And you will have a renewed appreciation for what you have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've gone back and watched some old games. I think I talked about it on the show. Maybe it was this show last week that I was watching the 2010 Sugar Bowl, and that was a big passing output. And it looks nothing like what the offense looks like now. And you know what? We can sit there and we can talk about Nebraska, and we can talk about some other things there at this point. And I'm not going to get back into the history and be like, who they had this week and who they didn't have that other week. And 21 wasn't as bad as 20 in terms of people disappearing from the lineup. But there's a lot of blame that can go around for less than perfect performances. And I'm not going to put the vast majority of that at the feet of CJ Stroud. I'm just not.
Cameron 2K says there's only 3 to 5 schools who would not want CJ Stroud. Are there 3 to 5 schools that would not want CJ Stroud?
I think maybe you put Alabama on that list because they just don't want the stress of trying to figure out what to do there.
Then I think that's the list.
And it's not because they wouldn't want them. It's because I don't want the headache. We're good with what we have.
Right. SC, Caleb Williams, and of course, Walter Camp, the preseason team there seeing fit to put, put the returning Heisman winner, Bryce Young, one. I'm totally fine with that. And then put Bryce, put Caleb Williams, two, a guy who's in a new system, bunch of new dudes around him, instead of the guy that finished 4th for the Heisman, left a closing argument by putting up 48 on Oregon or on Utah. And I understand that they had an offensive player playing defense, and there were some issues with all of that, but he was also doing it without Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson out there. But then again, that's just not good enough, and we should probably just fire up the should Kyle McCord start argument right about now.
It's crazy talk. That's for sure. That Walter Camp thing was just stunning to me. I mean, yeah, I hear all the buzz for the guy from USC, how great they're going to be when they go 8-4, 9-3, like they always do. So, heck if I know.
Now he's got that defense. They'll get that defense situated. They've got Alex Grinch there to lock everything down. They're going to be good.
Yeah.
We will start finding out in about 10 weeks. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football on our Ohio State show that we bring you each and every week, whether that's Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday this week. That's why you Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. We appreciate everybody being here, close to 200 strong. If you missed part of the show, which most of you did, please wait for it to post, which will be very soon, and catch, excuse me, what you missed. Tony's at Buckeyes Scoop. You got to catch him there, as well as Kevin, of course, at Buckeyes Scoop as well. Steve's at 247 Sports. Bucknuts. Steve, we always appreciate you posting the content as well. And you guys for being here every week. I hope everybody watching, whether that's live or the roughly 4,000 to 5,000 that watch the record, that you appreciate what these guys give us each and every week. All right, boys. Appreciate you being here. Have a great week. We'll do it next week at some point.
Happy and safe 4th of July.
Yep, absolutely.